Thanks for tuning in to Kalkine TV. James Preston with you for another edition of Executive Corner Expert Talks. And joining me today is Dario Valenza, the founder and Chief Technology Officer of Carbonix. Carbonix is a technology company that creates innovative and effective solutions to capture data from the air, including the use of fully integrated, remotely piloted aircraft systems. Fair to say, the specs involved in Carbonix creations are a little more techy than that of your Phantom 4 Pro. Without further ado, let's now meet the mastermind behind Carbonix, Dario Valenza. A very good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Good to be here.
Dario, great to have you on the show. I made a quick mention about Carbonix essentially operating as a company that provides data collected from aerial surveys, but can you break down exactly how that process works?
Yeah, so our background as a company is carbon fiber composites. And we've used the technology that we've developed in carbon fiber to develop airframes that are very efficient. They can fly for a long distance and carry a lot of weight. So with this capability, we can cover large areas, and this allows us to provide the data capture solutions that we do. So as a service, we can either sell the drone to the customer and train them up in using it, or we can operate it ourselves and deliver the data to the customer. And having full end-to-end control of the system means we can partner with the right payload providers and the right post-processing companies to be able to make good use of that data. And obviously to operate a drone, there are other aspects such as insurance, permits, training. We take care of all of that.
Yeah, wow, so it's a completely integrated service essentially. What kind of technology is being used in the drones that you're operating?
It's a material that is gaining a foothold in commercial airliners now, but over the last 10, 15 years, it's really been brought to the fore in competitive arenas such as the America's Cup, Formula One, and it's really a composite structural material where you have the carbon fibers that are laminated in a resin that gives you some material properties that are, roughly speaking, similar to steel as far as strength, but at a fraction of the weight. So if you imagine that the aircraft has to carry itself, the electronics and the payload, and you get an overall weight, the lighter you can make the airframe, the more payload and the more fuel you can carry. And that's really the basis of the performance of the drones. Now, the thing that differentiates our drones from other sort of comparable fixed-wing aircraft is that we can take off and land vertically. So we've integrated a system where you can sit the drone on the ground, you don't need a runway, you don't need a catapult or a parachute to land, and you basically plan the mission, upload it to the drone, hit go, and it takes off vertically, transitions to horizontal flight, goes and does the survey mission, comes back and lands, and it can relay the data in real time so that you can see what the drone's seeing during the mission.
So what I'm gathering from that as well is, I mean, some people tuning in right now might be thinking drones, they're quite small, we see them flying around the backyard here and there. How big exactly are the drones you're operating?
Yeah, so it's a very, I guess there's a big gap in the drone space. So if you imagine a multi-rotor drone, which is what you would buy, say, from JB Hi-Fi, or there are some sort of prosumer versions that might be up to sort of the 20 kilo mark. They're basically four rotors that take off and land and maneuver the drone. And then there's a big gap until the sort of military stuff. So when you think of something like a Predator or a Scan Eagle, where it's actually a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment that has a large ground footprint and requires a very skilled crew to operate. So we sit in the middle where we're at a price point that's more comparable to a multi-rotor, but we have the capability that's more comparable to a military drone. So we have two models. One is a 16 kilo overall weight drone that carries a 1 kilo payload for up to 2 hours, and it's all electric. And the larger one that we're offering now is a 35 kilo drone. It's about a 4.5 meter wingspan for the small one, wow, and a 5.5 meter wingspan for the larger one. And the larger one uses a hybrid propulsion system where it has a petrol motor that charges the battery in flight. And the larger one can carry up to 5 kilos for up to 10 hours, which gives you significant coverage for doing things like power lines and pipelines, national park surveys, large cattle farms, wherever there is a large area to be covered and data is required from the air. we can provide that.
Now, I know you've made mention of this already, that these are remotely piloted, should I say, drones, but are you looking anywhere in the AI space, any sort of autonomous drones being developed by Carbonix?
Yes, there is some autonomy already built in. So remotely piloted is sort of the CASA regulatory term, which means that there is a human in the loop that's always supervising the system, and that's required by regulation. And so the human can intervene to alter the mission or take evasive action, or in any way take control if something goes wrong. But generally the drone is autonomous in that you pre-program the mission and it will go and fly it. And that's important for something like a survey where you're looking for a very precise pattern to cover a given area. That's all done autonomously. In something like an ISR, sort of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance application, that there is an element of the pilot directing the aircraft to where it wants to be in the field. But again, the actual flight is all done, it's mediated by the flight computer, it's not flown manually. And that means it has the ability to recognize threats and alter the mission if required.
Look, I mean, for me, as a fan of Terminator and the whole James Cameron universe, it is, I suppose, quite refreshing to hear that there is still some sort of human element there, so we don't have Skynet 2.0 or anything like that. So great to hear, mate, that we can sort of, develop that, the path the drone flies essentially from the outset, and we know exactly what it's going to do, but then it takes over. So good to see still having that element in there. Let's now dive into some more detail about the remote aircraft systems that you've developed. You have touched on this a little bit in itself with the two different types of drones there, the one that's around the 16 kilos and the 35. How do they differ from one another, and what are they specifically used for, each drone?
Yeah, so the smaller one we call Volanti, the 16 kilo one. The main difference between the two is the propulsion system. So the Volanti is all electric, which makes it quiet. It means you don't have to sort of have a procedure for handling fuels. There are advantages to it, but the limitation is that because it's battery powered, the energy density of the battery is really a limiting factor. Obviously, we overcome that as much as possible with the lightweight construction of the aircraft and the engineering that we do. So as a battery drone, it has a very long range. And it's for where you, basically the application where you need 2 hours carrying about a kilo. So something like an ISR mission, as I mentioned before, where you're looking for situational awareness on the ground, whether it's staking out a police raid or looking at a beach and shark spotting, things like that. So that application is sort of driven by the time in the air and the weight that you carry. The Domani, on the other hand, we've gone with the hybrid route because it does allow us to get that sort of 8-10 hours flight time. And that application is very much targeted at things like linear infrastructure. So power lines, pipelines, mine sites, large farms, national park surveys, and that's where the area coverage really comes in. And also having the ability to carry a 5 kilo payload means you can carry a survey grade LiDAR that gives you a very accurate scan of terrain, or you can carry that and a high resolution camera. So it just gives you more options in terms of the resolution that you can get with your sensor.
Well, this is Executive Corner Expert Talks. I'm having a chat at the moment with Dario Valenza, the founder of Carbonix. Really interesting stuff that we're touching on here to do with drones and aerial surveillance and data. Now, Dario, how do the multiple payloads benefit your clients when they sign up?
Yeah, so it basically means that you can buy a platform and have multiple payloads that plug and play, which means you can do different missions and capture different kinds of data. For example, you could have a live feed with a gimbal camera that has a very high power zoom and perhaps multispectral, so you can get infrared images at the same time. And you can do that if you're looking for a live feed and situational awareness. And then your next mission, you can swap that out for a LiDAR, which is it's like radar with light, basically. It's a scanner. And you can use that to develop a point cloud of terrain. And so you have the two different options. And if there are specialized payloads that a particular customer requires, as long as they fit the weight and energy constraints that we have on the drone, we're able to integrate it. So we see ourselves as providing the platform, and the job of the platform is to get the payload where it needs to be and keep it there and relay the data back. And we work with different payloads providers, different post-processing companies, and different complementary services to bring that all together.
Yeah, well, I mean, this sort of jumps straight off the back of that. You've mentioned previously as well, you've got governments, or at least the national parks, that you might be doing surveys over the top. So I would imagine governments are probably one of the sectors that you cater for. What other industries use your service?
Mainly utilities, and it's really a matter of, I guess you'd call it triage, or prioritizing the focus of the business to markets where there is scale. So there are a lot of emerging niche applications that we could potentially service, but they may be a one-off or a bunch of small customers and applications. But something like linear infrastructure, it's critical data that needs to be gotten, and at the moment they're doing it with helicopters, which, as you can imagine, is expensive and has a large ground footprint and a large carbon footprint. We can aim for that market where there is a lot of infrastructure to survey. It generally tends to be in fairly uninhabited or remote areas, so it's not too difficult to effectively obtain permits to run those flights with drones, and the scale of the market is large. So our focus at the moment is infrastructure, so whether that be the companies that own and operate the infrastructure, or contractors that they engage to do their infrastructure surveys. So for power lines, for example, that's looking at vegetation encroachment, deterioration of whether it's the poles, the lines, or the different bits and pieces, any incursions into the property and the right of way. So it's really getting that, what we call a digital twin, which is a digital copy of the infrastructure that you can then update over time, and you can observe the changes. So it's very valuable because it allows infrastructure operator to make smart decisions about their maintenance and their operations.
Now, look, we've kind of touched on this throughout the interview so far, and just before we wrap up the interview here itself on Kalkine TV, just to ensure that conspiracy theorists are kept at bay without revealing any sensitive data, what are the kinds of intel that you're providing to your clients?
It's really just eye in the sky. So anything that you'd want to see from above, we can do. So again, depending on the payload, it could be a straightforward photograph, or it could be a series of photographs that you then stitch together to make an orthomosaic or a 3D model, or it could be a LiDAR scan, which is effectively a 3D model made up of points from the LiDAR. We don't have any big microphones. We don't look into people's backyards. It's really just a matter of getting that aerial view of what's happening on the ground. And that could even be things like cattle movements, feedstock, water level troughs on a farm. There's a number of applications, and once you're up flying, it's kind of it generates new applications, because there's always this creep of, while you're there, can you also check X?
Well, good to know that a bunch of those tinfoil hats can be removed to do with COVID-19 and people spying from the government, all those sort of things. That's great to know, Dario. Now, just before I let you go, there's obviously a lot of moving parts, a lot of high tech, a lot of money involved in the products you're creating as well. How does Carbonix ensure optimum performance, integrity, and innovation with everything that you do?
I think that's the easiest question so far. It's really culture. So the genesis of the business, the DNA of the founding sort of core and how it's gone forward is America's Cup competition. So that's an environment where you have an arbitrary set of constraints. You have so many resources and so much time. We always like to say the race starts on Sunday, whether you're ready or not. And really it's about focusing those resources to get the best outcome for that specific problem or that specific goal that you've set for yourself. So that mindset means you have to have initiative, you have to be competitive, you have to look elsewhere for inspiration. So wherever you can find it, we routinely bring in materials and technologies from other businesses and adapt them to our application, or from other industries, and really maintain that focus on quality, which is really a matter of being competitive, being curious, and being sort of objective about the goal, and always measuring your results objectively. So again, in America's Cup, you go race, you're either fast or you're slow. If you're slow, you've got to go back and see what you've done wrong and correct it. Similarly with these drones, they either fly or they don't. They either perform or they don't. Our goal is to achieve certain flight characteristics and a certain level of reliability. Everything we do is informed by that. And ultimately, it's in service of the client for what the client needs, which again is getting the payload where it needs to be to get the data that they need.
Yeah, look, it sounds like it's a sink or swim kind of business. You guys, to steal an analogy from the air, you're very much flying instead of being grounded. Dario, really fascinating chat, and I want to thank you so much for your time and joining Kalkine TV today.
Cool, thank you.
Well, that's Dario Valenza, founder and Chief Technology Officer of Carbonix. And if you'd like to check out that interview again, we'll be live on our YouTube channel, Kalkine Media, within the next 48 hours, along with the entirety of our expert talks to date. I'm James Preston for Kalkine TV.